Hey everyone, welcome to Insider Movies, number 24, I believe it is. And I'm sorry that I am in bed, but that's just the way it is, or else we're not going to have an Insider Movies. So I am not healthy enough to get up, and I try to tape nowadays. I really try to not tape unless I am sitting up. I really try to push it that way, because I actually have days like that now. But it is not to be, or else we won't have it. So we're going to do it. So, yeah. Anyway, so let's do it. I am very excited about these two movies. I already started taping and I got into other stuff and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to start all over again. So let's see. Okay, so the two movies we're going to do. Okay, so the first one is going to be Ghost. And I cannot even begin to tell you what a big movie Ghost was. Like, I can't even begin to tell you what a big movie Ghost was. Now the fact of the matter is that, like, I have this huge list of all the movies that we need to see. Like, all the movies that's on the list. If you have not seen, like, how Insider Movies developed and how my Insider Group developed and all that kind of stuff, you can see Insider 1 right here where I talk about it. But basically we have this big book and we have a list of all the movies that you have to know in order to survive in Hollywood. And, yes, this movie is on there. Both of these movies are on there. But the thing is that I only get to give you guys like 2 movies a week. That's it. Like, that's all we have is like one weekend. So then the criteria kind of goes up for me. I'm like, that's it. All I've got you, like, we don't have a lot of time. Like, I get to do my insiders like every night. Like, we get to, like, move through things and everything like that. So it goes much more quickly. So then I'm like, well, what do we need to watch? Like, it becomes a little bit more pressure for me, as far as like, well, what is going to move something further up for me? And the reason that I'm doing Ghost is because we've been talking about Agenda 21 and about the whole depopulation movement. It was very interesting. I was watching an interview with apparently a very, well, I understand it now. I understand it now because of the UN's funding and everything like that through the education system. But, there's a reason the schools are teaching your kids that it's evil. They are killing the planet if they have children. Like, the schools are teaching kids that. They're teaching that it is evil to have children because children kill the planet. Well, obviously science, like, completely debunks all that, like, in every single way. And there's a great interview with a guy who's like a total brain, like, nerdiac. And luckily he wasn't involved in politics when he was growing up. Not involved in politics at all. And he wasn't interested in politics because he noticed it made people argue a lot from a young age. And he just didn't want to fight. Smart kid. But he just loved science and everything like that. So he got into studying and everything. And then he became part of think tanks and all that. And he found out all this research. And when people would put out like crazy stats about climate change and stuff, he'd go read the papers and he'd find out how they'd like falsify it and kind of manipulate it. And I don't think he even knows it, but I was like, oh, actually, like, that's Soros and that's Soros. Like, I would see it, and because I know the patterns now, or I know the names of the societies, like, I know the names so well of the organizations. I don't think he even knows what Soros is, but I do. And so I'd be like, oh, I know what that is, or I know who that is, and I don't think he's even aware. But there's this amazing interview that you can watch and see his research in, where he runs into all of what he calls anti-humans. And I'll link it right here. It's with the Rubin Report. And kudos to Rubin for actually having him on, because Rubin has like all the different range of, because he calls himself a classical liberal, and he has a whole different range of viewpoints on there. He wants to have conversations. And that's what he does. He goes ahead and has this guy on there. And what's amazing is that it's very clear, because he keeps talking about the anti-human movement. He keeps running up against these people that are anti-human, that would not have built Manhattan if they had had their chance, that would want to like de-develop everything. And I'm like, wow, that's straight out of Agenda 21, like de-develop. And he's like population control. Now, when I was growing up, like, enough of the culture was still intact. They weren't they weren't saying population control. That was monstrous. Population control is the stuff that, like, Hitler said. and Stalin said population control was like the stuff that they knew led to genocides. And that generation was still around. And so it was known never to say it. Now we have monarchies saying it. We got princes and princes feeling comfortable enough to run around saying it. So why wouldn't the kids of today run around saying it, you know? So that interview was amazing. But what's interesting is he's like, yeah, I call them anti-humans. And I was like, humanists. And I was like, wow, you are like naming the Agenda 21 movement perfectly. But you're naming the movement that they've created, you know, this Agenda 21 through all their campaigning and everything over the last, you know, since 1992. And which apparently the Stones in 1980, the Georgia Stones, the Guidestones in 1980, we found out about. The first commandment, they're supposed to be the answer, the Luciferian Church's answer to the 10 Commandments. The very first commandment is population control. That should terrify us. That the first commandment of the Luciferian Church is population control, and Agenda 21 calls for population control. So when schools are teaching the first commandment of the Luciferian Church, time to take your kids out of school. I think that's about the strongest argument I could ever make for taking your kids out of school and bringing them to somebody's homeschool. Like, it is time. I don't know what else to say. Like, care about your kids. So, like, just please try to parent. Like, I'm getting pissed because I'm learning out stuff about, like, I'm reading the Gulag by Solzhenitsyn. I can't say it. I can never say it. But Solzhenitsyn. Not going to happen. But I'm reading it, and I'm learning stuff that I'm like, oh, he loaded people up on trains to the gulags. And I'm like, why wasn't I taught about that in school? You know, I was taught Hitler did that. Wasn't taught about that in school. And I'm like, right. Because, you know, the liberals were in charge of the schooling. They wiped that out of history. And I was just like, and my parents still sent me to school. And I'm just like, conservatives have known about this forever. And they have done nothing. I'm like, I don't know what kind of Republicans they think they are. Like, the Republicans that they seem to worship and love, the ones that stopped slavery, they kind of fought. They picked up a bayonet and stopped slavery. Like, they had some fight in them. They, like, you know, voted for the civil rights. They put their neck on the line for good things. Not today's Republican Party. Not for a while. You know, it's amazing. So, like, at least, you know, you guys know what I'm talking about. So, if you have seen my Twitter feed lately. So, but back to the reason you're probably like, what the heck, we're talking about ghosts. How do we get onto, like, depopulation? Well, my point is that part of that is the reason we don't have romance movies in Hollywood anymore. Like, there is a point to all of this. We don't have romance movies in Hollywood anymore. And that's part of all of this, is because, you know, romance movies lead to making babies, like, period, and lead to relationships and all of that sort of thing. And Ghost was one of the last love stories ever made. And if you notice the date of Ghost, it was made right around 1992. And it was a huge, huge hit. I cannot underplay what a massive hit it was. When you used to go into rental stores, like you've seen, like Jewel of the Nile now, like there used to be romantic comedies, but there used to just be romances. So, like, there used to be, like, an action section and a classic section and a new releases section, and there'd be a romance section. You could go into the video store and you go to the romance section. All right? So, like, Ghost would be in the romance section, you know, or the new releases, whatever, and stuff like that. But, you know, it's not just a romance. It's a really good, and that's why it was so big, because it's also hysterical. It had Whoopi Goldberg when she wasn't so political. And so it's just, hold on one moment. All right, I don't remember where I was, but we will just keep on going. So yeah, so you used to be able to get, like, romances in, like, every single section, and so, like, in every single store, and then it used to just be something you could do, and so the society was used to that. Like, the society was used to having all these different genres, and now like, the closest you're going to get to that, even if you go on Netflix, the closest that you're going to get to that is, well, like, if you look it up, if you notice, like, what they have for romance is going to be like some, like, Jane Austen novel or something from the BBC or something from TV. And then it usually ends in some tragic love story or something like that, which is why it's so important for you to see Ghost. Like, Ghost is the last time they've done a major blockbuster, like something where Hollywood really went after it and did a major blockbuster love story, and so that you can see how it's done. And it is hysterical, like Whoopi Goldberg's in it. It appealed to a lot of different audiences. It does have some action, it does have some it's just written really well. Like, guys loved it, girls loved it. I mean, it's such a good movie. And the reason I say it's a romance movie is just because there's a couple in it that loves each other. Like, and what became famous, the most famous scene in it was just like a love scene, but it wasn't even like making love or anything like that at all. And you'll see it. It wasn't like that at all. But it's such a big loss, and you guys need to know what we've lost in order to know what you're missing. Does that make sense? You really, really need to know what they are choosing to leave out now, like what is actually being carved out on purpose, and like why, you already know the reasons for it. Now see what it is and know that it's still out there. Does that make sense? And there was a movie made a few years, and I cannot underplay how big a movie it was. I mean, it just smashed. People would go back to see it over and over again. And not only that, but even for it being a big box office movie, it ended up, like, it just stayed in the theater forever. It was at a time when movies didn't stay in the theaters forever anymore. Like, there was a time, like, earlier in the 80s where, like in the 60s and 70s, movies would stay in the theaters for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, like months and even as long as a year. I think when, like, Star Wars came out, like, the movie would be in the theater for a year, and then that faded out throughout the 80s. And then, but, like, that was the thing, is that Ghost it played in the theater forever because people just kept going back to see it. Like, they just kept going back, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. And so it's kind of like the Goonies, but for, like, adults, if that makes sense. Like, there's Goonies, and that's for kids, and then there's, like, the adult version of the Goonies. It's just a really good movie, and it also, like, broke records with, like, rentals and, like, re-rental rates. Like, man, like, because I believe at that time, that's when, like, movie rentals were just becoming really big. Like, rentals were becoming a big thing. And it did really well for rental stores. Like, it started breaking records with re-rental rates, like release rates and rental rates. And stores were like, you could never get it. Like, they had to make a list. And they were like, sorry, you can't get it. And libraries couldn't get it. And it was just that big of a movie. And it wasn't a chick thing. It was like, guys liked it too. It was just one of those things that everyone could enjoy and families could enjoy together and things like that. So, and I was really, really young. I mean, I was too young to go to the theater or anything like that. God, I don't remember I'm trying to remember where I am in the line of everything. Cause I'm like, oh, I'm aware. To be honest, my memory of it is like in the living room. So I'm like, maybe I'm wondering how much is like, like my knowledge of stats and like, hearing what's been retold to me and like knowledge from family members and things like that. And then there's my impression like in the room and hearing. I mean, I love that. I loved listening at the checkout counter and hearing about things like that and hearing about, the things that broke things because, I don't know. It's funny because we just did that whole do what you are thing. And it's funny what you have a mind for facts for, isn't it? Isn't that interesting? Like, I'm an intuitive, but boy, would I just pick up, and maybe it's like what Jerry Weintraub calls is like gossip. He calls it gossip. He calls it industry gossip. He would sit back in the theaters and he'd pick up the gossip. He'd sit back, and I was like, oh, I think that's what I do. I think of it as stats and figures, but I was like, I think I was just really good at picking up gossip. Like, I was like, just like sitting back and listening to gossip. But that's kind of more of a sensing thing, isn't it? And I was just like, well, if it has to do with movies, then yeah. I was like, that's my one area. I asked for anything but math, but unless it had to do with movies, then I would remember it all. So anyway, so it is just a super, super huge blockbuster. And it is something that we are, it has been cut out on purpose, and it's a good thing to know about. And, there were other things made like Ever After, like that was a love story, but you will see with Ever After with like Drew Barrymore, like that's like a fairy tale romance. That's not like real romance. And then like Bridget Jones, but that's not like, that's like definitely a romantic comedy. You'll see with Ghost. Ghost is very, very, very different. It's very, very different, and you'll see the difference. And that's why it's so important. I mean, not to mention that it's legendary in Hollywood. It's legendary. And that's what I was going to say before I left. It was just this big blockbuster that did really well, but it wasn't meant to be, because Patrick Swayze was considered this big hunk, and Demi Moore was just considered this beautiful face that had just come out of doing all these 80s movies. I think it was for her first kind of like adult movie. She had just done all these things like St. Elmo's Fire and stuff like that. And it was her first transition into kind of like being an adult and not being this little teenager and doing all things like that. And I heard this wonderful thing. I never noticed it before, but she actually always chose strong roles. I never caught that before. And I think Ghost was one of the things that tricked me. You know what I mean? Because she could still just play, you can be strong and you can be feminine, and she does that. She is the epitome, like she would never ever play, I don't know, it's wonderful. I think it was like a true Hollywood story, and I really encourage you to watch that on Demi Moore. Like she really, really did that. But she made a transition with Ghost from all these like St. Elmo's Fire in the 80s movies and stuff like that into Ghost, and it was quite a feat. But what happened is Whoopi Goldberg was like nominated for an Oscar, I believe, with Ghost, and I believe that she did like deserve that. Like that was a deserve. So that for the people who are like Oscars for white and stuff like that, I'm telling you, like that's a new thing. When they got a stranglehold, like that is a new thing. It did not used to, like much more buried before. Like keep that in mind. Like all the way back then. When it wasn't just 6 companies owned by these people with this funding this one political party. When it was more varied, there was definitely, more recognition going around. And it was not like, like this. It was like, no, a comedian. That was the big story, was that a comedian got nominated. She was a comedian. She had done a ton of lead movies, like Jumpin' Jack Flash. She had done all these lead movies. It wasn't a big deal. Skin color wasn't the thing. It was that she was a comedian getting nominated for an Oscar. Like, that was the big thing. Like, we just moved so far past, So, that's Insider Dirt. So, and then the second one to do is, whatchamacallit? Oh, Dirty Dancing. Dirty Dancing. Which I did not see. Yeah, it took me a long time to see that. Like, oh my gosh. My family said terrible things about that. And then I finally saw it, and I was just like, I don't get it. Like I had to ask like what was wrong with it. I don't think I saw it until it was with my husband or something. But it's a testimony. Like I'd see clips and stuff, and it never loses. I should tell you what it is. Like, sorry. So I'm realizing like my personal history with it is so thick. I think that there are some wounds there. I think there are. All right. So Dirty Dancing is, I would say arguably bigger than Ghost. Um, Bigger because it's been redone. No one would dare redo Ghost. You can't. But it also has Patrick Swayze. See, um, there, I think in the religious community, they had a problem because, liberals try to push a certain agenda that was not popular yet. If you see Ben's thing about shaping culture right here, yeah, this was a big move towards shaping culture. Um, by the time I saw it, culture had already been shaped. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I don't get it. Um, so I don't know what to say about that. What I saw, and maybe it's because I'm a dancer. Well, actually, to be honest, what I saw and what I don't remember anyone talking about when I was this little kid, I was just like underage. Like, she's underage. That was what I saw. I was like, she's underage. This great famous love story, and she's underage. Why isn't anyone kicked up about that? Like, they were all kicked up about this other issue. And I was just like, she's underage. That's what I was kicked up about. But it tells you about the time when it was made, that it wasn't, it, oh gosh, it's hard. The thing is that the fact that that never came up, it was so popular with women and women loved it. Like, it tells you that when it came out, it's not that women weren't thinking it. It's that, like, the religious community could have gotten up in arms and about it. They didn't. Women fell in love with the film because they fell in love with the love and the dancing, and they related to it. They were like, I've all been there. We've all been there. We've all been there. We've all been there. We've all been there. And I can pretty much attest to, I've been there. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Like, maybe because we're so, like, litigious today, and maybe because of the feminist movement, and now the things that I know about the feminist movement, maybe that's why I was like, underage, and it was like a big deal to me, right? But I remember, like, now that I think about it, like, I for sure felt like, for guys, like, for sure in my dancing, like, ironically dancing, like, I for sure, because I started dancing young. And so at that same age, like, I for sure fell for guys. Like, I think the first guy I ever fell in love with was a dancer. Yeah. Yeah. And it was hard. It was hard. It was just like it. Just like it. It was stupid and not right. Or, well, not just like it. Not just like it. I should take that back. But I'm saying, like, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm underage and I should be. I was just thinking like, oh, here's this guy and he's like, he's so amazing and he's just like this amazing dancer. And I wasn't thinking age difference at all. You know what I mean? I was just young and naive, and I was like Baby, like they call her Baby in the movie. And I was stupid and naive because I was so locked down and so sheltered and so locked up or whatever and stuff like that, like I was, it was kind of funny because I watched again recently for The Insiders, and I was like, oh, this is like a mind, maybe I shouldn't be doing an Insider movies. I feel like I should just stop because I'm like, this is too screwing with my head. Anyway, it's something that you need to see. I'm like, oh, this is this is going to be more like sitting down with my psychologist than it is going to be Insider Dirt. So just know that, it was huge, huge, huge. It's been redone a few times. Never to the biggest success, of course, of the beginning one. The leap at the end, you will recognize it with the leap and the catch and everything like that. You will recognize it. And I would encourage you to not think of it as age. I would encourage you to think of it, if you can, because at the time that it was made, in the context it was made, in the culture it was made, it was supposed to be about your first time you fall in love. That's what it was supposed to be about. And that's exactly how people took it. That's exactly how people took it. which is why a totally different issue to do with a totally different character is what put everybody in an uproar. Everybody else, like, but the movie was wildly popular because it reminded everyone of the first time they fell in love. And it reminded everyone of where they, like, you know, went vacationing. I have, since moving to the East Coast, I'm like, oh, now I get it. Like, there are actually places like that. Like, we had traveled past them and everything like that, like, when we'd done our travels. But I didn't really get that, like those were the same places, you know. But now that we've, like, been meeting people and stuff like that, and, you know, getting to know and making connections and stuff like that, like through my husband's work and stuff, we've learned that, no, that's what those are, is the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's what people did back in the day. And I'm sad that we've lost that. Like, I'm really sad that we've lost that, because a lot of them are closing up, but a lot of them are still open, and people still do it and still go up there for summers. Yeah, there are still dance hosts. They still do things like that. And I'll be honest with you, like, the dance community, just like that, there are dance hosts that do the same thing, like the things where they go out there and they're nice and prim and proper, and then you go in the back and then you dance, and it doesn't mean anything. Like, you can dance with each other and stuff, like, not that I did or anything, but I'm saying, like the dancing they were doing, like, you would think that they were making it salacious for Hollywood, and they did a little bit, but in certain communities, especially in LA, like, if you're really pro dancers and stuff like that, it would depend on the song or whatever, but you could do that, and it just means, like, zero, which is really funny. It's really funny. It's really ironic the way dancing can work. But I think that, I don't know if some people just, I don't know if you'll be able to understand that. But I'll put it to you this way. Like, I taught once at this, I was hired once when I was a champion dancer. They hired me once. One of my students was, like, a teacher at a Christian school, and they were like, look, we really, really need to have something for our junior high kids. Like, the elementary school kids, apparently they do these, like, banquets. I don't know. I never did private school or anything like that. It was a whole new thing to me. But they do banquets or something at the end to celebrate the graduations of each class. And so they were saying, well, they do banquets with, like, whatever for the younger grades, and then for the high school they do something else. I forget what they did, but they went to an amusement park. But they're like, junior high, we can't really do that. We need something in between. And she was like, I really think you could teach this one dance, and you're just such a good teacher. And I think, you know, since you're also doing inner city school teaching, like, you're already accredited as a teacher, I think I can sell it as, you know, we can get you in and teaching. And I was just kind of like, all right, like, I'll try it. So I went in, like, you know, early in the mornings and tried this thing. And it was a little hard to sell the parents on it because they were Christian parents. But I was like, if you don't teach your kids to dance with one another, then society is going to teach them that the only way they can dance together, or not the only way they can dance together, society teaches that the only way and the only reason you touch is for sex. Like, the only reason you touch is for sexual reasons. Think about it. Everything in the media says the only reason you would ever touch another guy or another girl, you know, or girl and girl or whatever, the only reason you touch is for affection and sexual. And dancing breaks that. Dancing teaches that you can touch another person and have it not be for that whatsoever. Like, you can be safe with another around another person, and it teaches you to be, like, safe in a non-sexual. It teaches you to respect each other's bodies in a non-sexual way. And I gave her that tip, like, because, you know, I was already teaching in high school and stuff like that, so I gave her that tip. And it sold the parents on it. And by the end of the year or whatever, the banquet happened, and I remember the high school kids were really jealous. They were really upset that the junior high kids get to do it. But the parents came to pick up the kids at the banquet, and the kids didn't leave. Like, I remember the parents being lined up in the back, and all the kids were still on the floor dancing. And the only time the kids sat down is when someone put on like a thunk, thunk, funk song, like some kind of like, club mix. Like someone was like, you should really put on just at least one, contemporary, like thumping, like it. And we were like, all right, we will. And so we put it on, and it cleared the floor. And what was great is that they would all dance together. They'd all like, and you had to use techniques. Like, I was kind of smart about it. I used techniques to get them to dance together, because at first they don't want to touch their like ooh cooties, but there's a way you work around that. But the point is that by, you work around that, and you get them to the point where they're like, well, can we please freaking touch now? I'm tired of rotating. Like, I would just rotate. I'd be like, good. Okay. Put out hands. Nope. Rotate. All right. Put out hands. Rotate. To the point where they'd just be like, why are we touching? And I'd be like, all right, you can touch now. And they'd be like, thank you. I'm evil. But it worked. And then they didn't see classmates. And next thing you know, they were rotating classes and, breaking the boundaries and stuff like that. Dancing's so healthy that way. And so we'd say, okay, now find another class member, like a switch between grades 9 or 7 or 6 or whatever the grades were and stuff like that. But my point is that like dancing doesn't have to be dirty. Like, it doesn't have to be dirty. And I know that the movie, like in the movie, says dirty dancing, and you can watch that. But I watched that and I saw the pro dancers dancing, and they made it look all salacious and stuff like that. Except that I know that it's not. Like, I was just like, yeah, I know what those guys are doing, because I know those dancers, if that makes sense. And I was just like, it doesn't feel that way. Like, it's not making them want to go, like, it's just, there are some where there's always like the certain guys that are like the artists or whatever, but they're usually picking up the new student. Like, it's usually not another pro dancer. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's usually a whole other story. So it's kind of like this narrative of like, there is this narrative out there that, I know some colleges used to ban dancing because they said it led to, and I was like, actually, it kind of prevents. It kind of prevents. It prevents. That's an old myth. You need to be able to teach people that it's safe, because you don't want to create wonderment and fear to actually touch each other. You want to be able to let people feel like they can touch one another, but you can't do it of like, oh, just stand there and be with one partner. You have to trade off partners and get them used to trading off partners and make it fun and make it friendly and make it something that like, that it is that, the opposite sex is not a threat, that they're safe. And the whole idea of dancing is that you learn to respect the other partner. You learn to respect the other partner. You learn to respect them. It doesn't work unless you each respect each other. And it's just a wonderful skill to learn. Like, if you don't respect each other, each one of you will hurt each other, and it's not a good experience. But if you both respect one another, then women can do things they can't do. Like I, for example, like the things that I can do as a pro dancer, like the stuff I can do, like the splits and I can't do that without a partner. Like, I can't do it. And the leans and the hips, he can't do that without me. Like, when you dance together, you bring out things that you can't bring out without one another. And so there are like, and that's what's so amazing about dancing, is that it also teaches you the skill that together, like, you elevate each of your potentials. You don't hold each other back. It's not like, oh, he's controlling you and you're controlling. No, if you learn the skills of like doing it right, then, if you respect one another, you both end up being able to do more than you'd be able to do if you were just standing on your own. And it's just amazing. So that's why I miss dancing so much, because like, even if I could stand up, like, I still can't do any of the stuff like I need to be able to dance, because I was able to do so much like glorious things, and that's still in me. It's still in me. So, but my doctor said that's their goal now, is to get me back to that level. And I was like, if my doctor actually said that, like if my doctor actually said it, then like if my doctor actually said that, like the doctor's not saying, okay, get you walking again. They said, get you dancing again. And I was like, you know, because that procedure I told you guys about that the other doctor denied me, like my other doctor has approved it. They're going to do it, and it's scheduled. So sorry, I should do that for another video, but oh no, there you go. That's what you get when it's like I'm sitting down but I'm not doing well. You end up getting other information. So happy Insider Movies 24. And when that's great news. That for me, that's wonderful news. I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I will not be this way forever, guys. No, 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 no. You can bet on that. Go enjoy Ghost. Go enjoy Dirty Dancing. And you need to know them. And the theme is love. And they're both so good that it is not, they're both, remember that these were not the love movies of today. Remember, these are the love movies of like, you know, decades ago. So these are the movies that are, they will remember how you watched my movies and you're like, I didn't know they could make movies this good. These are better than the ones today. They're like that again. Like, they're really that good. Oh, and I remember Dirty Dancing when we watched it. I was like, I know guys like that. Like, I know guys like that. And I know guys like that. Oh, you guys are going to know. You guys are going to know. It's like not who you think or whatever. And you will finally know the great Patrick Swayze. I can't believe I didn't say anything about that. You got to know the great Patrick Swayze. He's in both of them. And he was just a massive heartthrob. And if you can't figure out why he was a massive heartthrob without being a model, he was an actual actor or whatever. He's kind of that transition of going into, like, I think because he broke off box office records, kind of like, I can understand why they were like, well, why don't we get some more hunks or whatever. But after Ghost, he was just like, you'll see, after seeing Ghost, you'll see people were just, well, he did Dirty Dancing first, which was huge, and then he did Ghost, and it was like all over. It was all over. All over. And I think he got like Sexiest Man Alive like twice. And you have to remember that back then they used real men. Like they used to use real men. Real men. Not models, not chopped up faces, not porn stars. Like that's who they use today. They use things based on pornography. Back then, they used real men that you could maybe run into in a grocery store. Like, who's your dream? Like, who's a good-looking guy that if you ran into them in a grocery store, you'd be like, whoa, I got lucky in the grocery store. They get guys like that because they wanted to make it something like, you know, realistic. They were trying to make it like movie magic, but something you could run into. You know, they were moving away from like the Clark Gables and stuff like that of the older day or whatever and stuff like that. This was more of like the, you know, Mel Gibson era, Kevin Costner era of like the everyman. If you don't know what everyman is, well, then we're just going to have to move on. That's okay, because it has nothing to do with movies. All right, I've worn myself out. Bye, guys. It's finally time for bed. Finally time for bed, I think. All right, bye. I love you. And enjoy one of these 2 videos. And thank you so much for joining me. It was an honor and a pleasure. I like that Hans Wilhelm thing where he said it is an honor to have your company. I really liked how he said that. I enjoyed your company. Thank you for your company. Thank you for your company.